Oh, she'll tell us. And we have to wait till exactly 1:15. Testing. That's okay. I'm not talking much. Did the temperature people say they were going to do something?
All I could say is that I've passed on the request that Carl check it, so hopefully he will address it.
Please, because I can't sit here like this.
Do you need a sweater?
Do you have one?
I do.
Oh, okay. And gloves. And a scarf. Boots. Oh, that's wonderful. And it matches. Good. If it didn't match, you couldn't do it.
Oh, we both have the pants on.
Mhm.
Go when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you for the sweater. Good afternoon, Ponders. Happy Monday. It's another time for Meet Your Neighbor. And today is a little different because we're going to have two people back to back, Artie and Sharon Raphael. They moved into Woodland Pond in April of 2018, and they live in a cottage. And Artie said, that's all I can say, and I'm turning it over to him.
Thank you, Halema. And hello to all my friends here at Woodland Pond. And I'm happy to see my wife sitting over there. I'm so used to, of course, as many of you know, my career was as a teacher. And it's hard to be here without a classroom of high school students running around or getting up and coming in late with a late pass. But and this is my first time doing something like this, and I have prepared my presentation. Some people say that you know you are getting older when you start thinking more of the past than thinking about the future. I knew I had to say a few words for this interview today, and some of you know that at times I can go on and on and on. I will try to be brief. This past March 14th, in fact, I turned 80 at the start of COVID-19. I'm a pi baby. I hope you know those mathematicians and individuals who have worked at computers know what what pi stands for, 3.14. And that was the day I was born. On that birthday, my friends here and my wife went to Esopus Meadows Scenic Hudson Park to celebrate my birthday. We practiced social distancing, walking through the park, as well as wearing our masks. Thinking about my 80 years, I would like to use a baseball game to describe my life. Loving baseball, a baseball game is a good analogy to use from my life. The first 3 innings, my mother Claire gave birth to me, as I said, March 14th, 1940, at New York Hospital in Manhattan. My father, Doc, as he was called often by his friends, had a pharmacy in Astoria, Queens, right near the Triborough Bridge on 30th Avenue. We moved 3 times while I was a child, all within walking distance of my father's pharmacy. Of course, my father walked to work, as well as my mother walked there later in the afternoon to help him. I have a sister, Suzanne, 7 years older. By the way, she and her husband 4 years ago moved to a CCRC in Evanston, Illinois. My early years in Astoria, I was loved and cared for by my parents and my sister. I had many childhood friends, some of which I still keep in touch. I played games, typical games in the streets and in the back alleys behind our house, 2-family house, which was the second house that we lived in. Next door to my 2-family house was 2 wonderful friends, 2 Greek friends, Tony and Georgie, and their brothers. So they were next to us within a small alleyway. During the school year, I walked to PS 5 and 6, no longer are standing. Both of the buildings, one burned down and one was taken down. As a teenager, I helped in my father's store as a stock boy or delivering medicine to seniors unable to come to the pharmacy. Now, instead of going to my neighborhood high school, where most of my friends, in fact, all of my friends in the neighborhood went to the neighborhood high school, I applied to and passed the entrance exam to Stuyvesant High School, which is located in Manhattan. The original building was on 14th Street. No, I'm sorry, on 2nd Avenue and 15th Street. It's now downtown near the what was the towers. Those years at Stuyvesant High School were very difficult for me academically, but taking the BMT to Union Square 5 days a week for 4 years gave me an appreciation and love of the city. So that's for the first 3 years, my early years of living in Astoria, Queens.
No question.
Okay. Innings 4, 5, and 6, the middle innings. I was interested in art. So I went to Oswego State Teachers College, just north of Syracuse on Lake Ontario, not for 4 years, but for 5 years. After my freshman year in industrial arts, I easily transferred to science, having a strong background in science from Stuyvesant. Why I transferred is a funny story for another time. I graduated in June of 1962 and began my teaching career at Jonas Salk Junior High School in Levittown, Long Island. I lived at home with my parents, and I would drive to work and back and forth for 2 years. Now here during the game, there is a stoppage of the game. It started to rain, just figuratively, not really. But for me, the sun came out for the next 2.5 years. In 1959, JFK ran for president. And in 1961, he became the 35th president of the United States. In his inaugural address in January of 1961, his famous words rang a bell in my mind. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. One of his programs that interested me was the Peace Corps. Sadly, JFK was assassinated in November 22nd, 1963. Everyone remembered that day. I remembered it very well. I was teaching at Jonas Salk on that Wednesday, and as I drove home after the students were let out early because of what had happened, I heard on the radio that he died. That weekend, that whole weekend, I'm sure many of you, including myself and my parents, were glued to the television watching the procession and cortege of President Kennedy. That January 1964, I made application to what I was interested in, the Peace Corps. I was accepted in May of 1964, resigned my teaching position in June, and left for 10 weeks of training in Hilo, Hawaii. So, I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about where I went and what I did, and hopefully when we get together again, I would like to show you many pictures and slides of the 2.5 years that I spent in country. Now, the program that I was assigned to, or I was assigned to, was a secondary education program teaching English as a second language, modern mathematics, and teaching or improving methods of teaching science in high school and at college. The country that I was assigned to is located in Southeast Asia. Some of you might recognize the flag of the country that I was assigned to. The 10 weeks of training was an intensive 10 weeks of language training, subject matter, area studies, government policy, physical education. Everything went through that. It was the most difficult 10 weeks of training that I had ever experienced. Language training was 3 hours a day. The language, I took French in high school, and I think for 3 years, I got 65, 65, 65. I passed the Regents. If I remember, many of you might remember, language was taught to memorize. There was no dialogue. We were not concerned during training with our two interpreters or two teachers. They didn't want us to learn grammar. They wanted us to dialogue back and forth. So for 3 hours in the morning and in the afternoon, that's what we did. Through repetition, dialogue, and study, we began to pick up the language. So, the Peace Corps. This map that is here is the map of the world, of course. And I don't know if the colors are coming out, but today there are over 60 countries that have invited volunteers to serve in their country. Now, many of you might also know that these Peace Corps volunteers, as a result of the pandemic, have all come home. They have left their service. They have left friends that they made. Their programs were cut short. Of course, this pandemic is worldwide, and Peace Corps volunteers are all over the globe. Over 200,000 volunteers have returned from overseas since 1961.
Artie, are you going to mention the country?
Yes. The country that my program, of course, I was going to, is in Southeast Asia. Now, you might see it on this map. It's kind of small. It's very small, but and it's in Southeast Asia, and there are over 7,000 islands that comprise this country.
Oh, okay.
My parents took a map from National Geographic, backed it up, hung it in my room, and they wanted to know where I would be. And they were worried, of course, when they said goodbye to me at JFK Airport, and we flew to Hilo, Hawaii for training. For 2.5 years, they knew probably that they would not see me. So here is the 7,000 islands, a larger picture of the Philippines. Of course, you have Indonesia, Vietnam, and other countries. Some of you, I know Cynthia Lee has spent a number of nice days of vacation traveling through parts of these countries. So after training of 10 weeks, initially we were 85 volunteers. At the end of training, we ended up with 67 volunteers going to the country. We flew to Manila, spent 2 weeks in Manila, teaching in schools, meeting government officials, and then I was sent with one other volunteer to the northeastern province of Ilocos Norte, and there in the capital of the province, Laog, L-A-O-A-G, Laog, the capital of Ilocos Norte, was Northern Luzon Teachers College. And it was there that my roommate, and that's another funny story, not a funny story, it was a nice story initially. Howard Rake, would you believe, well, he graduated from Columbia University as an English teacher and came to the Peace Corps with me with the other 85 volunteers. And he was there to teach English as a second language. But that's another story, and I have other things to talk about. So I traveled here during those 2 years. I worked in Ilocos Norte and worked with a co-teacher. I was not teaching by myself. The second year I did. The medium of instruction is in English at that level, and I worked in a elementary school that was attached to the college, very much like the teachers' colleges here in New York State that I was used to, that there was always a practice center where young children were then taught by aspiring teachers. Oh, I'm wearing, by the way, some of you might recognize a shirt. It's called the Barong, B-A-R-O-N-G, Barong, which means shirt, Tagalog, Barong Tagalog. It's the national shirt of the Philippines. It is made of pineapple fiber. This is not the one I wore. How many years ago, Sharon? 52 years ago. 9 years ago was the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Peace Corps, and there was the celebration of the 50th anniversary in Washington, D.C., and I needed to buy another Barong Tagalog to wear for the dinner reception and for the weekend that we spent celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Peace Corps. Speaking about my wife, who's sitting over there, I took her to the Philippines 6 years after I returned, and of course after I met Sharon and married her, or before, after. Yes, so I wanted her to visit with the Filipinos that I met and be in the country and see the places that I went and enjoy the customs and celebrations. So, in June of 1966, my service was terminated and I returned to New York. I began a master's degree in science education at New York University as a member of the National Teacher Corps. It was an in-country United States program that Lyndon Johnson had developed for aspiring young people wanting to be teachers, wanting to help in the cities and the Indian reservations across our country. I co-taught with a wonderful mentor in the South Bronx at William Niles Junior High School, located at 179th Street and Arthur Avenue. It was at NYU where I met Sharon. This August, we will be celebrating our 52nd anniversary. A roller coaster ride of being together through the good and bad times, with bumps along the way. But Sharon has always been by my side, laughing, crying, and sharing our ups and downs. Sharon was and still is a wonderful mother to our son, Aaron, born in 1973. Our careers after getting married took us to Long Island. I went back to Long Island, to Suffolk County, where I taught high school earth science, coached soccer, and saw our son go off to Michigan University. All right, we're finally in the last 3 innings. I hope you maybe have gone for a hot dog or something, or gone for some food or a drink. But we're in the last 3 innings, 7, 8, and 9. If you've been to Long Island, you know why Sharon wanted to move. But first was my desire to have an apartment in Manhattan. In that same year, 2005, we moved to the Hudson Valley, to Gardner, not knowing anyone, but being near to New York City and our apartment on West 70th Street. For the last 15 years, we have found a community of dear friends here in New Paltz. 2 years ago, we decided to move to Woodland Pond to bring us closer to the community of friends in New Paltz, and also meeting new friends here in this wonderful community of Woodland Pond. Well, the baseball game is not over. It's going into extra innings. I don't know when the final pitch will be thrown, but I still feel young, exercising, hiking, doing the things I like to do. And most of all, spending time here at Woodland Pond with all of you. Just this past October, Sharon and I traveled to Alexandria, Virginia, for the birth of our granddaughter, Gabriella Sophia. We are thrilled and very happy for the new parents. And of course for us, this is our first granddaughter. When it is safe for all of us, we will be visiting them again. We also look forward when they can come here and visit with friends in New Paltz and with friends here at Woodland Pond. I want to, if I still have a few minutes, I see, to give you a feeling of distance. I did miss my parents. My parents, of course, were worried terribly about me. And it was hard to communicate. We didn't have iPhones. There was no internet. Here is a Western Union telegram that I sent to them after completing training and going off to Manila. There were times when mail was delayed, but I have show you, some of you might recognize this. This is a letter from my father, who wrote to me, and my mother wrote to me often. But sending it by air letter. And I have kept all of these letters from them. And they have, of course, saved the letters from me. And I have them in my hands. I want to mention, too, since I have some time, that currently there is a movie which can be virtually ordered. A virtual ticket can be ordered from either Rosendale or from Newburgh, the two theaters in those two locations, Rosendale and Newburgh. It's a new movie that was part of the film festival in Denver, Colorado. And it won one of the awards, the 2020 movie festival in Denver. The movie is entitled A Towering Task, the story of the Peace Corps, a film by Alana DeJoseph, narrated by Annette Bening. And so through interviews and old pictures for an hour and a half, there is a movie that can be put on your screen at home, just going to the website and ordering it either from Rosendale or Newburgh. It does require a $10 cost, which goes to both of these movie theaters.
I'd just like to add a couple of things. I got to know Artie principally through our watercolor class. He is a gifted artist, and it's been a pleasure sharing class time with him and watching the work that he does. He also takes individual lessons, I believe, with our instructor.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Halema.
And I got to know you through Celebrate Woodland, where we rehearsed for 10 weeks, singing songs written by Lola and myself, and you were great enthusiasm, participated. And I know that you're very active with Cole High here. I guess they're not meeting here now, but you are
Yes.
active with that group.
Sharon and I are also members of the congregation here in town, but also have gone to services at Cole High when it was held here. I am, of course, try to be active, and just really enjoy living here. I have found a place like home. Sharon will talk about our place in Gardner. That too was difficult for me. It was a dark. If my mother was alive and knew we were moving, first of all, out of the city, anyway, she had problems with us living on Long Island or away from places like that were near to hospitals and medical facilities. So she was worried. She was a worrier, but I loved my parents. My father worked in the store, and my mother took me all over to Manhattan, enrolled me in music classes, art classes, ballet. I love to dance. I love the square dancing that Deborah has started here, or I've joined with Sharon. I enjoy that. And I enjoyed talking and meeting with all of the staff members, and I haven't gotten around to all of you, but I hope I will.
And you're also delivery deputy. You stepped into that. And I also shared exercise classes with you. So
True.
we've crossed paths for the last 2 years, and
Yes.
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
But this has been marvelous. And as you told our community, when we're all together again, please God, some point, you'll give a PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Halema.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that you bought that 9 years ago, because I was looking at it and thinking, is he the same size he was 52 years ago?
Well, just about my size. After college, my undergraduate college, I lived at home. And so I gained weight. And when I went overseas, I can talk about my food and other things and life in general. What was it like there at the PowerPoint presentation? But when I came back after 2 years, I was extremely thin, and I had lost quite a bit of weight. I did have dysentery for a period of 2 to 3 weeks initially because we couldn't drink the water. Our water had to be boiled. And so there are just many, many other stories that on a one-to-one basis or a small group, I would love to continue to talk about
Well,
my experience overseas.
and we very much look forward to that. And now, in a couple of minutes, Sharon will be talking about her life before you and with you and here at Woodland Pond. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you,
Thank you so
Halema,
much.
and thank Gretchen, please,
Sure.
and anyone who's responsible. I know just Jason and the video, but thank you very much.
Okay. Just tap on it to make sure it's on.
Hello.
Okay. Yes, very nice job. Okay, here we are, 1:45, and it's Sharon's turn. And I know Sharon through exercise classes and through
Thank you so much.
Celebrate Woodland also, and meals, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and your interests and hobbies. Thank you.
Halema. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. This is a lovely, lovely idea that you've had, and it's a wonderful way to get to know people a little bit better in our community. I really feel honored to have been asked by you, and I hope to share a little bit of myself with you right now. I was born in Albany Hospital, and I lived my early years in upstate New York. I lived in Albany, Utica, and Poughkeepsie. My family traveled around a lot. My dad worked for the state, so I would be in an elementary school for a few years and then a different school, and it was not easy, but it was the way we lived our lives. I had an older brother, Don, who was a very protective brother when I was growing up. I can always recall as a child wanting to become a teacher. I remember when I was a little girl being in my room and taking my dolls and stuffed animals, lining them up on the bed and creating some sort of a classroom situation. I was always the teacher, and I seemed to have a real connection with these little dolls and stuffed animals.
And you had no behavior issues. Right.
These children were so well behaved, Halema, you can't imagine. But from that early interest, I went on to the State University at Cortland, and I graduated with a degree in elementary education and in fine arts. From my student teaching experiences, I realized I really liked working with kids who had challenging issues. I, for whatever reason, felt an attraction toward these youngsters. So I applied for a master's program at NYU in special education and received a degree in working with children with emotional disturbances and learning disabilities.
It's just interesting. The three of us went to NYU for graduate work.
Oh.
So
Interesting. I didn't realize.
Of course,
that.
you were way ahead of me.
Most definitely. Okay. I taught for 30 years special education on Long Island. It was a very challenging career, and there were many years where I had kids who were, their layers of challenges were so vast that there was never a dull moment, and I was always challenged. It was difficult. I mentioned that I had gotten my master's at NYU, and Artie also was a student at NYU, and we met when we were both students. I was a newbie to New York City. I had lived in upstate New York all my life, and I moved to the city being a real country bumpkin. Fortunately, I moved in with a woman who was really city smart, and she took me under her wing. I learned a lot from her. I learned not to smile at people on the subway and many other things that she did to toughen me up. She said to me at the time, back in the 60s, if you want to meet a guy, we have to go to some of the singles bars. That was the scene. So she and I headed out to a place called Maxwell's Plum.
Oh, Maxwell, sure.
You've heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
It was on 2nd Avenue. It was a big draw for singles. And I met Artie there. We had a very quick romance. And after about a year's time, we were married.
Oh, so you didn't meet him at school? You met him at Maxwell's?
That's correct.
Oh,
That's
but
correct.
then you found out you were both in the same school.
Well, it's an interesting story. Briefly, we didn't meet actually at NYU, even though we were both students there. My roommate was taking some of the same classes as Artie. And after our first date, which I thought had gone well, Artie didn't ask me for my phone number, didn't ask me for my last name. But being that I was so interested in him and finding out that my roommate was in a few of the same classes as he was, I wrote him a note and she brought it to him. And I said, how about we get together? And that did begin
Good for you.
our love affair.
That
Yeah.
was pretty brave for the 60s.
It was very forward. It was very
good for
forward.
you.
But I knew that this guy was someone I was really interested in. So anyway, by the end, after we graduated from NYU, we were married. In our early years of marriage, before becoming parents, we did a lot of traveling. Let me put my glasses on. I'm losing sight of this.
Oh, those are nice.
Thank
Woo.
you. That's better. We traveled a lot during our vacations, being teachers we had the time. This was all very new and exciting for me. Being that Artie had lived and traveled in Southeast Asia because of his Peace Corps experience, my initial journeys were to the Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan. The different cultures of these countries heightened my awareness of the common humanity and decency of people who were all so different from me in many ways. I was bitten by the travel bug. which remain with me throughout most of my life. Some of our more unusual trips were to Israel, where we lived on a kibbutz and we worked on an archaeological dig. Traveling to Alaska and out into the Bering Sea to the Pribilof Islands to watch the great herds of bull seals.
Mm.
Trips to Africa to go on safari, and to Australia to meet indigenous people. A trek in Nepal with a friend was challenging and mind-blowing. I feel very fortunate to have experienced so much abroad. And on the home front, where we visited many of our unique and exquisite parks.
Mm.
Besides traveling, I enjoy physical activity and the outdoors. Hiking in the Shwangunk Mountains has been blissful over the years. That was one of the reasons that brought us to this area. After we retired and knew we wanted to move to a more rural setting than Long Island, we journeyed upstate to Gardner, which is only about 13 miles from New Paltz. We bought my ideal house, a log cabin in the woods. We lived in a very quiet and natural setting, which was peaceful and removed from the hustle and bustle of Long Island. We were minutes from hiking trails at both the Mohonk Preserve and Minnewaska State Park. We became active members of the preserve and met people who were also committed to hiking and the outdoors. Over the years, these friends became our family. In Gardner, we devoted lots of energy to gardening, watching and feeding birds, viewing an occasional bear and fox, and other creatures that passed through our nearby woods. As time passed, we felt that our ideal home was feeling a bit too isolated for us. We always loved the liberal and free-spirited New Paltz atmosphere, wanting to be closer to our friends who lived in New Paltz, the college where we took classes, not having the responsibility any longer of a house. We decided to make our final move to Woodland Pond. It was a big adjustment at first, but has proven to be a good fit for us. We have made a new community of friends here at the pond. We feel safe and comfortable, whether we're outside gardening, walking in the neighborhood, or at the nearby Millbrook Preserve. I enjoy singing with the Pondoliers and the rehearsals and presentation of the 10-year celebration. I've always loved going to museums in the city and learning about artists, their lives and styles. Art scope has been very enriching for me. I have broadened my own art exposure by enrolling in Mira Fink's watercolor class. This is something that I might not have attempted if it weren't for the offering at Woodland Pond. The physical classes in the morning are a great way to start the day, and square dancing is a good memory exercise. Finally, by living here at the pond, I have met many people who are wonderful role models for me. They have kept the spirit alive in spite of the vicissitudes of aging This has been an inspiring and thoughtful message for me. I hope it makes me more appreciative for my life.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Sharon.
You're quite welcome.
I marvel at your work in the art class. You are a natural. You know, you said you haven't done much of it, but it is very lovely.
Thank you.
And when I take a walk past your cottage, you're out there talking to the plants and moving
It's
them,
true.
and it's lovely. It really is lovely. Well, you and Artie certainly have added a lot to our community in your
Thanks.
time here, and you will be a role model for other people as well. So I'm just thrilled. Any other hobbies that we don't know about besides your try? I know you took 2 or 3 trips since you've been here. You went to the islands, I believe.
Mm, well, yes, that's a very special place for us. St. John
St. John.
in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Mhm.
Artie and I have been very fortunate. We've been going there for many, many years. What attracted us initially to St. John was the ability to hike the island. About 3/4 of the island is national park land. So it's been set aside with a wonderful network of trails. So we would hike there. Um, we also liked, again, the um, non-glitziness of the island, the laid back Caribbean feel. Um, and the other trips, we've slowed down in our travels. There are a few places in the world I would like to see, and perhaps return to a few places whenever that becomes a possibility.
When you talk about your trips, I'm reminded of some of our friends who have also done a lot of traveling, and they have said almost to a person, I'm so glad that I did it then, because I don't know if it'll be possible again. But it's wonderful that you've had that and you've had it together. It's great. So coming from upstate and going through Southeast Asia, that was quite a trip. Great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I feel like I said, very fortunate. I think travel is a wonderful way to educate oneself. Like I said, you really, even though cultures are very different, especially once one starts traveling in some distant countries, you still start to see the basic humanity and connection
mhm,
amongst people. And I think that's something that will stay with me throughout my life. I think it's helped. I hope it has helped to make me a better person.
that's a big benefit.
Yes.
Gives you perspective, and no matter the language, the culture, the color, we're all the same.
Right. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Wonderful.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. To use Artie's baseball metaphor, this was a wonderful doubleheader, and I'm really, really grateful.
Very good, Halema.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Okay. That was very good, Halema. I like that.
It's wonderful.
Thanks for asking us.
Oh, sure. It was a pleasure. It's still on, so I don't want to talk. You
Okay.
just both so prepared. Oh, she's going to shut it off now.
That's
No,
the only.
stop. She has to call them downstairs to shut it off. It's funny that the control room is downstairs. But you were both so well prepared, and a nice glimpse of the unit that you are. You know, I was in Dedrick's and I thought I saw you shopping for
a little girl's outfit. And I thought, she must have a granddaughter.
You're right. Gabriella Sophia, and they call her Gabby. What that beautiful name. Thank you. She's a sweetheart.
Thank
She
you, folks.
really
That
is.
was really
Thank you.
interesting.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thanks, Gretchen.